Hollywood carefully crafted Humphrey Bogart as the ultimate symbol of hard-edged masculinity. The trench coat, the cigarette, the steady stare, all of it designed to project dominance and control. But there was a detail the studios worked tirelessly to conceal. Bogart stood just 5 feet 5 inches tall, shorter than many of the women cast opposite him. Camera angles were adjusted. Sets were altered. Ingrid Bergman quietly bent her knees in nearly every scene they shared. The illusion held so well that audiences never questioned it. Yet height was only one of the truths hidden behind the image. Whispers followed Bogart for decades, stories of countless affairs, a wife who allegedly stabbed him during filming, and a dependence on alcohol that traced back to his childhood and never truly released its grip. The man behind the myth bore little resemblance to the figure immortalized on screen. Humphrey DeForest Bogart was born on Christmas Day in 1899, inside a stately brownstone at 245 West 103rd Street in Manhattan. From the outside, the home reflected stability and success, sunlit rooms, fine furnishings, and the quiet assurance of old New York wealth. His father, Belmont DeForest Bogart, was a prominent heart surgeon whose patients came from society's upper tier. He carried himself with authority and precision. But behind closed doors, Belmont battled an opium addiction that left him emotionally absent and increasingly detached from his family. His mother, Maud Humphrey, was equally formidable in her own way, a respected commercial illustrator and an outspoken suffragette. Her work and political causes consumed her attention. In one of the more unusual footnotes of Bogart's early life, Maud used her infant son as the face of Mellon's baby food, placing his image on jars sold across the country. As an adult, Bogart spoke of it with thinly veiled resentment, masking discomfort with sharp humor. Despite the house's beauty and privilege, warmth was scarce, for servants maintained the household. Summers were spent at an elegant estate. Everything looked ideal. Yet inside, raised voices echoed through the corridors. Doors slammed. His parents' marriage felt less like a partnership and more like a constant storm, one that never fully broke. Young Humphrey learned early how to survive in silence, to shrink inward, to observe rather than engage, to guard what he felt. That restraint would later become the cool, unreadable presence audiences mistook for confidence. Though surrounded by comfort, he felt untouched by it. Belmont's medical office occupied the basement. Maud worked in her studio upstairs. A pigeon coop sat on the roof, serving one of his father's eccentric hobbies. Life stacked itself around Humphrey, but rarely with him at its center. Arguments between his parents were so intense he sometimes hid just to escape the noise. His mother vanished into her work. His father moved through the house like a shadow, eyes distant and hollow. Slowly, deliberately, Humphrey learned to lock his emotions away until doing so felt natural. His parents envisioned a carefully engineered future for their son, Trinity School, then Phillips Academy Andover, followed by Yale and a respectable medical career. It was a plan built on order and expectation. But the boy they sent to those schools had little interest in fulfilling it. At Trinity, he drifted through his classes, disengaged. At Phillips Academy, his quiet resistance sharpened into open rebellion. Stories followed him of defiance, drinking, smoking, open contempt for authority. The most infamous tale involved throwing either the headmaster or a groundskeeper into Rabbit Pond. Whether fact or exaggeration, the message was clear. In 1918, Phillips expelled him, and with that decision, Yale disappeared from his future. His parents' disappointment weighed heavily, though by then Humphrey had already withdrawn emotionally. When World War I arrived, Maud intervened to keep him from the front lines. Instead, he was placed in a relatively safe Navy role as an escort officer. Even there, fate left its mark. During his service, an accident, the exact cause remains unclear, sliced his upper lip. Some claimed it was a coconut, others a piece of wood or flying metal. The injury left him with a permanent scar and a slight lisp. Later, Bogart would describe it as a war wound. The truth was less dramatic, but the scar became inseparable from his image. After leaving the Navy, direction eluded him. He bounced from job to job, ship hand, salesman, cab driver, none offering stability or purpose. He seemed to drift through life, never quite finding solid ground. Then, in 1921, at the age of 21, he auditioned for a Broadway play called Drifting. On opening night, nerves overwhelmed him. He vomited backstage just moments before stepping into the spotlight. But when the applause came, it changed something. For the first time, he felt pulled toward a future instead of pushed along by expectation. Broadway became his proving ground. Between 1921 and 1930, Bogart appeared in 17 stage productions, usually in minor roles, earning about $75 a week during the depths of the Depression. It was barely enough to survive, but he endured. In 1924, he gained attention in Nerves, playing an alcoholic husband, a role uncomfortably close to the habits forming in his own life. During this period, he married actress Helen Menken on July 20, 1926. Both were 26, swept into marriage by momentum and pressure rather than stability. The relationship collapsed within a year. Rumors circulated that Menken preferred women, that something had gone wrong on their wedding night, but the truth dissolved into speculation. She died of pneumonia in 1931 at just 26 years old. The loss left a quiet, lasting mark on Bogart. In 1928, he married again, this time to stage actress Mary Phillips. Their union was volatile from the beginning, shadowed by gossip that she spent the night before the wedding with one of Bogart's friends. Fidelity was fluid on both sides, affairs treated less as betrayals than inevitabilities. Then, Hollywood called. Bogart entered a world of contracts, lights, and relentless schedules. Fox Studios signed him, only to drop him 2 years later, dismissing him as lacking sex appeal. He drifted into more than 20 B-movies, almost always cast as criminals and disposable toughs. Later, he joked that he died in nearly every film, shot, hanged, electrocuted, or imprisoned again and again. At Warner Brothers, the cycle continued. By 1934, Bogart felt trapped in a career that offered no escape. His marriage to Mary Phillips deteriorated. His drinking intensified. Dark thoughts crept in, and he wondered if his life had already peaked before it had truly begun. From 1936 to 1939, Warner Brothers worked him relentlessly. In just 4 years, he appeared in 28 films. He was killed in 12, electrocuted or hanged in 8, and sent to prison in 9. At times, he worked on 2 films simultaneously, sleeping wherever space allowed on set. These years forged the hardened, battered image audiences would one day embrace. But behind the scenes, Bogart felt exhausted, confined, and worn thin. Then, in 1936, everything began to change. Leslie Howard, already firmly established as a major star, drew a line that Warner Brothers could not cross. He refused to make The Petrified Forest unless Humphrey Bogart was cast as Duke Mantee. The studio pushed back, preferring another actor, but Howard would not yield. His insistence changed Bogart's fate. Because of that decision, Bogart stepped into a role he had already performed nearly 200 times on Broadway. The film became a major success, earning more than $3 million and securing Bogart a studio contract worth $1,000 a week. More importantly, it altered how he was seen. Critics and audiences noticed something unexpected in his performance, an edge that felt wounded rather than brutal, intelligent rather than loud. There was depth there, a quiet danger mixed with vulnerability. It set him apart from the disposable gangsters he had been playing for years. Still, the machine did not slow down. Between 1936 and 1940, Warner Brothers kept him working at a relentless pace. Film followed film with little room to breathe. But beneath the exhaustion, Bogart sensed a subtle shift. The roles were growing more complex. The audience response was changing. Inside the studio, his name carried more weight than it ever had before. The door had not fully opened, but was no longer sealed shut. In 1939, he appeared in the Roaring Twenties playing George Halley, known as Texas, a doomed bootlegger headed for a violent end. It became one of his most powerful early performances. Ironically, many of the roles that lifted Bogart higher existed only because George Raft turned them down. Raft believed gangster roles were beneath him, a decision rooted in pride that repeatedly worked against his own career. Each refusal created space, and Bogart stepped into it, growing more assured with every performance. The frustration he had carried for so long began to fade, replaced by the steady confidence of a man finally moving in the right direction. Off-screen, however, his personal life was unraveling. In 1938, Bogart married Mayo Method. Their relationship was volatile from the start, fueled by heavy drinking, explosive arguments, and constant turmoil. They fought publicly and privately, drawing attention wherever they went. During one drunken confrontation, she stabbed him. On USO tours, they carried guns and fired them recklessly into the night. At one party, she pointed a pistol at him. Bogart stitched his own knife wound and returned to work as if nothing had happened. The marriage finally ended in 1945, leaving behind a trail of chaos that would have broken a lesser man. Throughout these years, Bogart carried a deep resentment toward being permanently cast as a gangster. Earlier in his career, he had turned down the lead role in Little Caesar, a decision that haunted him as he watched others rise while he remained stuck in the margins. He believed something in his face, his voice, or his stillness made people assume he was the villain before he spoke a word. He wanted more than that. He wanted out of the box Hollywood had built around him. When his breakthrough finally came in 1941, it looked sudden, almost accidental, but the groundwork had been laid over years of rejection and endurance. Before that moment, Bogart was the actor studios used to fill dark corners of the frame, the henchman destined to be dead by the third act. Then High Sierra arrived in January of that year, and everything felt different. For the first time, Bogart stood at the center of the story. Playing Roy Earle, he brought gravity and humanity to a character who might once have been disposable. The production took them into the Sierra Nevada mountains, and during the film's climax, Bogart slid nearly 90 feet down a rocky slope, a raw, dangerous moment that left audiences gripping their seats. The performance carried an intensity that could not be ignored. By October 1941, the Maltese Falcon elevated him even further. Made for less than $400,000, the film earned more than $3.3 million at the box office. As Sam Spade, Bogart embodied sharp intelligence and moral ambiguity with effortless control. He fit the role so perfectly that audiences quickly forgot he had ever been anything but a leading man. With those two films, his life changed, and the path to legend finally opened. That path existed only because of another twist of fate. George Raft was still Warner Brothers' top star, and the studio initially wanted him to lead High Sierra. Raft refused. He did not want to play another doomed criminal. Bogart recognized the hesitation and quietly encouraged it, telling Raft the role was nothing special. It was a calculated move, subtle, perhaps even sly, and it worked. Bogart took the part, delivered the performance of his career, and became an overnight force. The film earned $3 million and brought him his first Academy Award nomination. Raft's refusal went down as one of Hollywood's most infamous miscalculations, as Bogart rose and Raft slowly faded from prominence. The Maltese Falcon continued that ascent. Director John Huston approached the film with relentless precision, storyboarding every shot before cameras rolled. Bogart met that discipline with equal focus, bringing Sam Spade to life with a balance of charm, menace, and restraint that felt entirely new. The film's legacy endured, even spawning misquoted lines like, "Play it again, Sam," a phrase never spoken in the movie. What mattered was the confidence of the work, sharp, lean, and fearless. Humphrey Bogart had arrived, and there was no turning back. Behind the composed screen persona, his private world remained unstable. Mayo Method's jealousy intensified, erupting into violent outbursts. Friends recalled hotel rooms destroyed after long nights waiting for Bogart to return from set. His own drinking only fed the chaos. Some days, he consumed 2 full bottles of whiskey, arriving at work barely functional and delaying production while crews stood by. Their marriage burned hot and loud, filled with broken furniture and public confrontations. The contrast between the calm man on screen and the storm in his personal life followed him relentlessly until the marriage finally collapsed in 1945. During World War II, Bogart and Method attempted to channel their energy into something meaningful by joining the USO. From 1943 to 1944, they traveled through Italy and North Africa, meeting soldiers who had just watched Casablanca in makeshift theaters. Standing in the real city of Casablanca felt surreal to Bogart, like stepping into a memory he had already lived. The tours were exhausting and dangerous, but they strengthened his image as a man deeply connected to the country and its sacrifices. That sense of duty lingered, influencing the roles he chose after returning to Hollywood. Then came the moment that changed everything on a more personal level. In 1944, during the filming of To Have and Have Not, Bogart met 19-year-old Lauren Bacall. The connection was immediate. She called him Bogey. He called her Baby, partly because of her youth and partly because the crew teased her for looking so small beside him. Their scenes crackled with an energy that needed no explanation. Something unmistakable had begun, and neither of them tried to stop it. What began as an unspoken spark on set slowly drifted into quiet conversations, stolen moments, and eventually into something neither of them could deny. By that time, Casablanca had already reshaped Humphrey Bogart's life. Filmed throughout 1942 and released in early 1943, the project was never intended for him. Once again, Warner Brothers offered the role to George Raft, and once again, Raft turned it down. Bogart stepped in and delivered a performance that lingered long after audiences left their seats. The film was modest by studio standards, costing far less than Warner's larger productions, yet it earned approximately $3.7 million and won 3 Academy Awards. Bogart lost Best Actor to Paul Lucas, but the outcome hardly mattered. Casablanca transformed him into the top box office star in America from 1943 through 1946. The line "Here's looking at you, kid" slipped out during the 4th take and became immortal. Despite the success, Bogart bristled under the studio system. He resented how tightly Warner Brothers controlled his career, and that tension pushed him toward independence. Only one frustration rivaled his hatred of studio control: the issue of height, which followed him everywhere. Bogart stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, while Ingrid Bergman measured 5 feet 9. Hollywood insisted its leading man appear taller, and the illusion became a carefully managed production. Bogart wore platform shoes nearly 3 inches high, tightly strapped to prevent him from losing balance. When that failed, he stood on small concealed wooden boxes the crew jokingly referred to as bogey boxes. Camera angles tilted downward to elevate him, while Bergman was instructed to sit, slouch, or subtly adjust her posture. Even the fog-filled tarmac scene in Casablanca helped disguise the lifts. The illusion was flawless. Audiences never questioned what they saw. But physical tricks were not the only secret surrounding that film. Mayo Method arrived at the Casablanca premiere drunk and publicly accused Bogart of having an affair with Lauren Bacall in front of reporters. Their marriage was already fractured, and the outburst pushed it closer to collapse. As filming continued, rumors about Bogart and Bacall grew louder, trailing him relentlessly until the divorce was finalized in 1945. Casablanca itself was famously chaotic behind the scenes. The script remained unfinished until the final day of shooting. Writers revised dialogue, restructured scenes, and reshaped the ending while actors waited on set. The studio rushed the film into release to align with news of the Allied invasion of North Africa. The timing amplified its impact. Audiences flooded theaters, and Bogart reached a level of fame that could no longer be contained. In 1945, just days after his divorce from Method was finalized, Bogart married Lauren Bacall at Malabar Farm in Ohio. He was 45. She was 20. The ceremony was intimate and warm, attended by close friends, including writer Louis Bromfield. Soon after, they moved into a $160,000 home in Holmby Hills and became one of Hollywood's most talked-about couples. Their son Stephen was born in January 1946, followed by their daughter Leslie in 1952. Bacall would later say she never had a better friend than Bogart. Their personal connection fueled their on-screen work. When The Big Sleep was finally released in August 1946, delayed nearly a year as the studio prioritized war films, it cost $1.6 million and earned more than $4.9 million worldwide. Audiences responded to the heat between Bogart and Bacall, particularly during the now-famous desk kiss that pushed the boundaries of its time. Director Howard Hawks embraced their real-life romance and reshaped the film to showcase it. The success led to 2 more collaborations, Dark Passage in 1947 and Key Largo in 1948. Dark Passage concealed Bogart's face for much of the film, but off-screen he was hiding something else. Stress and years of unhealthy living had taken a toll. He suffered from alopecia areata and relied on wigs and treatments to maintain his appearance. The bandages that wrapped his character's face felt unsettlingly close to reality. Still, the film stood out for its unconventional camera work and Bogart's restrained, internal performance. That momentum carried him into one of the defining achievements of his career. In 1951, Bogart won his only Academy Award for The African Queen. Filming in the Congo tested everyone involved. Bogart and Katharine Hepburn fell ill from contaminated water, and the oppressive humidity made each day punishing. The leech scene became legendary. While most shots used rubber leeches, the close-up featured a real one, causing Bogart to recoil in genuine disgust. He later described the entire production as one of the worst experiences of his life. Yet it permanently reshaped how he was seen as an actor. He had already delivered another classic in 1948 with The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The line about badges became iconic, though it was improvised by Alfonso Bedoya rather than scripted. Shot in Mexico under relentless heat and tension, the film featured one of Bogart's most complex performances. Many believed it should have earned him another Oscar nomination. Some suspected his outspoken political stance played a role in the omission. That stance came into focus in 1947 when Bogart testified before the House Un-American Activities Committee. He denied being a communist but openly criticized the witch hunts consuming Hollywood. The decision cost him roles and strained studio relationships, but it earned him something he valued more: independence. He helped form Santana Productions, allowing him and Bacall to choose their projects and escape total studio control. Their home soon became a gathering place for Hollywood's brightest personalities. Frank Sinatra, Judy Garland, David Niven, and many others filled the rooms with laughter, arguments, music, and long nights fueled by alcohol. After witnessing one such evening, Bacall famously referred to the group as a rat pack, and the name stuck. At the center of it all stood Bogart, steady, sharp, and unflappable, the quiet anchor amid the noise. Between 1948 and 1954, Humphrey Bogart's life moved with a strange balance of momentum and inevitability. Each success carried him higher, even as every step seemed to draw him closer to a darker edge he could never fully outrun. Around Humphrey Bogart, the whispers never stopped. People claimed he had slept with more than 1,000 women before marrying Lauren Bacall in 1945. The rumors grew louder as familiar names circulated through gossip columns: Betty Davis, Jean Harlow, Marlene Dietrich, Ingrid Bergman. None of it was ever firmly proven, yet the stories followed him relentlessly, shadowing every public appearance. His relationship with Bacall had already ignited controversy. When they met in 1944 during The Have and Have Not, she was 19. He was 45, married, and one of Hollywood's most recognizable faces. Their chemistry spilled unmistakably onto the screen, and when the romance continued off camera, it became a fixation for the press. Even after they married, Bogart's appetite for distraction never fully disappeared. Verita Thompson remained part of his life for 17 years, drifting in and out long before Bacall and long after. Thompson later wrote that Bacall once discovered them in bed together, a moment that nearly shattered the marriage. Yet Bogart kept Verita close, allowing her access to his home, his routines, and his family as if she belonged there. The arrangement lingered quietly in the background, woven through the years of his greatest success. Before Bacall, and even after her arrival, Bogart's life had already been defined by chaos through his marriage to Mayo Method, a woman whose volatility mirrored his own. Their relationship burned constantly, never cooling. In 1942, during a drunken argument while he was working on Across the Pacific, she stabbed him in the shoulder. On another occasion, she carved her initials into his arm. Their home earned the grim nickname Sluggy Hollow, a place where objects were always breaking and voices were always raised. Neighbors reported shouting almost nightly. Reporters fed on the spectacle, selling over 1 million copies whenever another scandal erupted. Mayo drank until she lost control, sometimes setting fires or brandishing firearms at parties. The darkest moment came in 1943, when she slashed her wrists in a desperate attempt to escape her pain. A shaken Bogart begged her to seek psychiatric help. Their marriage unfolded like a prolonged catastrophe, and the world watched without looking away. As his private life imploded, his public image darkened. Stories of violence surfaced and multiplied. His first wife, Mary Phillips, later said Bogart gave her black eyes when he drank heavily. His second wife, Helen Menken, spoke of emotional wounds that never healed. With Mayo, the violence ran both directions. Friends such as Gloria Stewart recalled seeing bruises on Method's face more than once. They remembered moments when Bogart tore her clothing or hurled bottles across rooms. The tabloids turned these scenes into theater, sensational, disturbing, and impossible to ignore. It shaped how the public saw him, angry and damaged, dangerous and wounded all at once. The image clung to him, reinforcing the tough guy persona even as he tried to move beyond it. Part of that darkness came from deep inside. Bogart had grown up watching his father slowly disappear into opium addiction. In his own life, the escape took different forms. Cigarettes and whiskey replaced opium, but the destruction followed a familiar pattern. 3 packs a day. 2 bottles of whiskey. By 1950, the damage to his liver was severe, laying the groundwork for the cancer that would eventually kill him. Those around him saw it clearly. The cigarette never left his hand. The drink was always within reach. The same self-destructive cycle that consumed his father tightened around him as the years passed, even while his career continued to rise. Hollywood, meanwhile, continued shaping his image with technical precision. Bogart stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, the same height as Bacall, but many of his leading ladies were taller. Studios worked tirelessly to disguise it. He wore shoe lifts on set and sometimes stood on boxes during scenes with Ingrid Bergman. Costume designer Ori Kelly favored high-waisted trousers, short jackets, and vertical patterns to lengthen his frame. Directors shot him from low angles, avoided full-body shots, and leaned heavily on shadows, especially in noir films, letting his face carry the weight. Across more than 75 films, the camera became his collaborator. A man of average height was transformed into a figure who felt imposing, dominant, and larger than life. In Casablanca and Key Largo, every frame was engineered to reinforce that illusion. Few viewers ever noticed the effort behind it. By the early 1950s, Bogart continued pushing forward even as his health quietly failed. In The Caine Mutiny in 1954, he delivered one of his most precise and unsettling performances. Captain Queeg's paranoia and unraveling were modeled after real-life Navy tyrants, and Bogart leaned into the character's instability until it felt painfully authentic. His courtroom monologue earned him another Academy Award nomination, a rare late-career triumph at a time when his body was already betraying him. That same year, he starred opposite Audrey Hepburn in Sabrina. He was 55. She was 25. The pairing sparked fresh rumors and revived uncomfortable headlines. Some critics felt the chemistry was strained, possibly because Bogart had wanted Bacall in the role. The age gap unsettled audiences, and discussion lingered long after the film's release. His final film, The Harder They Fall, was completed in 1956 while he was already gravely ill. He coughed through scenes, sometimes spitting blood, yet refused to stop working. When filming ended, doctors confirmed what years of smoking and drinking had made inevitable: esophageal cancer. In February 1956, after months of worsening symptoms, Bogart visited Dr. Maynard Bronze in Beverly Hills. Tests first showed inflammation, then malignant cells. The diagnosis stunned him. He was 57 and still working with the same relentless drive he always had. When urged to undergo immediate surgery, Bogart asked if he could finish the film first. The doctor answered bluntly he could delay, but doing so would make him a hero only at Forest Lawn Cemetery. On March 1, 1956, surgeons at Good Samaritan Hospital operated for 9.5 hours, removing his esophagus, a rib, and multiple lymph nodes. Bogart survived the procedure, but the damage had already been done. The cancer had taken hold in ways no surgery could truly reverse. After the surgery, Humphrey Bogart tried to fight back. Chemotherapy followed, nitrogen mustard, a drug derived from the same chemical weapons used in World War I. It was meant to slow the disease, but instead it ravaged what little strength he had left. His weight dropped rapidly. His muscles weakened. By November 1956, scar tissue from the operation began pressing against his nerves, forcing doctors to operate again. The second surgery brought no relief. It only deepened the pain. Those final months closed in around him. Bogart withdrew from the world, allowing only a small circle of friends into his room. Lauren Bacall recorded everything in her diary: the moments of weakness, the labored breathing, the steady disappearance of the man she loved. Friends who visited were stunned. One said he looked as skinny as a starved cat. Another remembered the sour smell of his breath, a sign of how far his body had deteriorated. His son Stephen, just 16 years old, watched his father shrink to barely 80 pounds. Bacall's diary became a record of endurance and grief, holding on to the truth of those days because there was nothing else left to hold. Hollywood did not come rushing to his side. When Warner Brothers learned of his cancer, the studio cut his insurance, leaving the crushing medical costs to Bogart and his family. For those who knew him, the decision felt cold and brutal. It exposed the reality behind the glamour, a system where loyalty often ended when profit did. The kindness that mattered came from elsewhere. Frank Sinatra arrived with an oxygen tank and stayed close to Bogart's bedside, offering quiet support when much of the industry turned away. The contrast was unmistakable. In a world built on image and contracts, compassion still existed, but it came from individuals, not institutions. In the early morning hours of January 14, 1957, at 1:45 a.m., Humphrey Bogart died. He was 57 years old. According to Bacall, his final words were simple and heavy with exhaustion. He said he should never have worked past 50. It sounded less like complaint and more like realization, an acknowledgement of how much his body had given and how little it had left. The news moved through Hollywood like a shockwave. Tributes poured in. Fans mourned. Colleagues remembered him with a reverence he had rarely allowed himself to believe in during life. Bacall held tightly to the memories they shared, the joy, the chaos, and even the pain, because all of it belonged to them. What remained was a legacy both powerful and complicated. A man forged by discipline and damage. A star shaped as much by illusion as by truth. Humphrey Bogart left behind performances that refused to fade and final words that lingered quietly, the echo of a life that burned fiercely and for far too long.